This is the Balanced Growth Show with Dr. Travis Perry, helping successful business professionals like you achieve balance in their lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Growth Show. I am your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today we have with us Mr. Sean Patton. Sean is a U.S. Army Airborne Ranger and Special Forces Green Beret Commander. He earned the respect of his men in chain of command while operating in hostile and politically sensitive environments. Now in the private sector, he has applied these lessons in new ways, growing multiple companies. His company, Stronger Leaders, Stronger Profits, is spearheading a revolution in leadership, thought, and practices. To Sean, fulfillment and profitability are not opposing forces, but mutually supporting to unlock an organization's true potential for greatness. Sean, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Doctor.
Absolutely. This has been fun to get to know you in the pre-show. And you know what? I really want you to tell us a little bit about your experience as an Army Ranger, Special Forces Green Beret, and why in the world are you doing executive coaching? Fill us in on what these steps are to get you where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give the brief version. So I'm originally from Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, outside Kansas City. And leadership has always been sort of a passion and a natural inclination of mine. And then when I applied to go to the military academy at West Point, I got in. For those 4 years and then the preceding 10 as an officer, I kind of feel like I crammed a lifetime of, lessons in a lot of ways, but especially when it comes to leadership, right? There's very few places that are where it's education, training, and experience in sort of elite leadership. There's kind of no other way that I know of to get the intensity of those experiences and the quality of those experiences. So went to West Point and wrestled for 2 years on the wrestling team, got out and went into the infantry. And I came to Fort Campbell, Kentucky after graduating Ranger School and Airborne School. And that brought me in the Middle Tennessee area. And there I took over my rifle platoon and later a scout and sniper platoon, spent 14 months in Southwest Baghdad during that time, and wanted to challenge myself after I got back a bit more and with the Special Forces assessment and selection. Got selected, and after about 2 years of training, got my Green Beret and happened to come back to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and was lucky enough to take over my first Green Beret team, Special Forces Detachment, or ODA. And that started a whirlwind of about 4 years of being in Special Forces that really put the accelerator down on some of those leadership and mindset lessons and in a whole new way. And, it's not many places I showed up as an example. I showed up, brand new commander, captain with my Green Beret, show up, go down to the team room to check in with my team. And I'm 28. I'm the commander, right? But the youngest guy on the team. So you show up, you're in charge. 3 days later, I was out in Coronado Island, outside of San Diego. We were doing cross training with SEAL Team 5 and Special Battle Team 12. So I know I'm leading this team of guys I met 5 days ago, climbing a caving ladder, taking down ships, learning to take down ships underway in the Pacific Ocean. We had to come back early from that 3 weeks later. And then 6 weeks after that, I was on the Afghan-Pakistan border. So it was just so many opportunities to learn and push myself in a way that you just don't get to in a lot of other areas in life. And so I decided that, I kind of had done everything I came in to do. I got to command 2 different teams, really lucky with the amount of time I got to lead soldiers. And, everyone has parts of their job that they love and parts they put up with. I was never really the gun guy or the gear guy or any of those other things. For me, it was always leadership and problem solving. I just love seeing the power that it has on people, and when people realize potential, and when you get a group of individuals leading with a leader that's really going with the same vision and values and is really synced, just the amazement that came from seeing what was capable. And I wanted to sort of bring that and bring those lessons over. So I got out in 2015 and decided that I need to learn as much about business as I could. So I got my MBA. I started a company that I got my real world MBA. Company ended up failing. I had to go through a personal and professional bankruptcy, kind of lost everything. Hardest thing outside of combat I've ever done is be an entrepreneur. and then pivoted, started the next company, which is a jujitsu company. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And that went really well. So sort of checked off formal education in business, real world MBA experience. And I started Stronger Leaders, Stronger Profits a few years ago and kind of been off since then.
Wow. Yeah, that is a path that most aren't able to take, quite honestly. And number one, thank you for your service. Thank you for giving to your country. And I know that's from your heart and what you wanted to do to give to your country and serve. At the same time, the lessons that you learn, that you're exactly right. Like most people don't get these opportunities. You're not going to Coronado Island training with SEAL Team 5 every day. Like it just doesn't happen. So how cool is that at the same time, right? I'm so grateful, but honored that you're with us, talking to us about leadership. Someone that's been in the trenches, has seen failure, and then grown a business. Let's talk about growing this business. I know your first step was to get this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, company off the ground and have a company that you could lean on and say, hey, this is my real world experience in business after you got your MBA. Let's talk about how you were able to grow that and to scale it. Because I know a lot of people, they like the arts. They can't ever figure out how to do what you did. It's always sort of a hobby, side gig, and they enjoy doing it, but it's never really a full-time, let alone scaled. So talk to us about how you're able to scale that.
Yeah. So those are all, great points, because it is sort of that, it reminds me of that classic business book, or the E-Myth, and I'm sure, you have read. It's, don't start a bakery if you want to be a baker, that's just not how it works. So, for me, I think what helped me was I had a very clear vision of why I was doing this. I mean, I love jujitsu. It's changed people's lives. I know it's saved people's lives. In some ways it kind of saved mine when I went through some dark times, but I always knew that I was building a jujitsu business, that I wasn't building a place where I could teach jujitsu. And I think that mindset going into it really helped, because, if you go into a business or any venture, say if you're going to say, well, I want to be, a speaker, right? And I want to start a speaking business. Well, if you just say, well, I just want to speak, you're going to create a different business model from the beginning than if you say, I want to create a public relations firm that does some speaking and makes $100 million, right? Like the way that you would structure that, the values, the vision, everything is totally different. So for me, going into it, knowing that the plan was to build a business, to scale it, and then put it in a place with the right people, with the right leadership, with the right processes, where it could run itself. So then I could transition to the leadership. I think having that mentality really helped, because I went in thinking I'm building a machine, right? A business is a machine. It should work. And that machine should work without you in it. We need to be able to have a business or a set of systems and processes where people, give you money to get some value, and then they get the value and you take the money, and however it happens in the system, that's your business. So really the structure of that. And then of course, outside of model, it became about people, right? Especially that's a service business. It's not a tech company. It's not an algorithm that we're trying to sell to make things more efficient. It's really about things like customer service and quality of teaching, and really culture and vibe and value. And those are some of the toughest businesses to scale, because it's so human intensive, And so it came down to exactly kind of what I preach and everything I did in the military, which was, how do you create a mission, value, culture? How do you find the right people, get them to buy into this larger mission and purpose, and then create a model and processes that are repeatable, so you can start to create this sort of perfect balance of standard operating procedures and systems and models, and have some consistency in terms of operations, but then have that human element be solid, so that everyone is aligned with the same values, the same mission, and you have some. You also not just have standardization and processes, but you have standardization in cultures. So when you go to one gym or the other, it might be slightly different, but you're going to get the same feel, same way you would, go into a different McDonald's. So it was really about people and processes, and putting it in the framework, knowing that our goal was to scale and create a system that I was able to step away from and still have it function.
Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, and I'm sure that there's crossover from what you've learned in the military, being able to, give service, working on teams. It's about people. It was about people then. It's about people with your jiu-jitsu company. But the E-Myth. So Michael Gerber, he doesn't know this, but I'm his grandson. Not biologically. Coaching. One of his very first coaches was Dave Crenshaw, and Dave Crenshaw trained me. So, I feel like whenever I hear Michael Gerber's name, like the guy's famous, he's done phenomenal things, but he's really been able to figure out repeatable processes, like you said. And if you can manage the people and the processes, the systems, you have a great business. In fact, as I studied families, I have a PhD in family relations. As I studied families, I realized my favorite theory was family systems, which was essentially stolen from business. And they said, hey, business has systems, families have systems too. And this is how they work, built on communication and values and trust and all these other things that fit together. And I thought, no wonder. It's because of these systems, because of the training from Gerber and others have really been super focused. So I love that you mentioned that. I love that you mentioned, values and mission. And obviously in what you do now, how has growing this jiu-jitsu business translated into you now being able to help other leaders have such a stronger leadership in their businesses?
Well, just from the business side of jiu-jitsu, because I will say that jiu-jitsu itself has taught me a lot. And there's a lot of analogies and lessons there that when you look back from learning a complex, martial art that is basically human chess is what jiu-jitsu is. So there is a lot there in terms of mindset and growth that has been beneficial. But in terms of just growing the company itself, and how that's translated over and lessons learned, it's probably twofold. One was understanding and getting and taking sort of the theory right from business school and the things that you could, you can research right now and get a piece of paper that walks you step by step of the right way to start a business, right? But that doesn't mean you actually know how to do it in the real world. And so going through the processes and understanding, things like sales, right? Like, I never really, I had to persuade in the military, and that helped a lot in sales, but that's a different experience. So getting reps on how to think through that, how to set processes, for me, especially coming from a special forces team and a bunch of Green Berets, I knew that working with employees would be different. Like I didn't think that was the same thing. I knew the guys I worked with were special, and there was all these filters that they had to go through and training and all that. But I didn't realize how different it was going to be. And especially my first business, the one that failed, was a gym franchise that, I did a lot of things great. I still people, my first business, second year open, we won small business of the year in the town. And we grew to 400 people, all these things, but had some other issues, some early entrepreneur mistakes, signed on to a lease deal that's too high, like all these other things, not understanding financing that got in the way. But, going through that, having to like hire and evaluate. And I did not have a grasp of how different that experience would be, and how different people's mentality can be, how their worldview can be so different. Because even in the military, right, it's diverse in terms of, I would say socioeconomic status. I mean, I had guys on my team that were from some of the wealthiest families in this country, and I had guys who came out of, the middle of Harlem in a trailer in North Carolina, right? So I had ages, you've got different values, backgrounds, all those things, race, all that. But the funny part is, we almost talk in sort of marketing in the world that's diversity, right? Like demographics, age, background, socioeconomic status. But when it comes down to it, real diversity is, diversity of worldview, diversity of values, right? All those things, and different purpose. So having to deal in that, it was a much larger mosaic of humanity, to have to navigate and to have to evaluate. and have to find, dig it, to find what drives them, to help them even sometimes find motivation, help them find purpose in a way that, by the time a guy comes through the Army basic training, few years in infantry deployments, goes through selection, 2 years of training, they show up on a team, like there's a lot of filters there. That's a certain type of person. And so the human component was very interesting in terms of the lessons in the company that I had to learn. And again, I guess coming back to that human component, right? That you can shift your model and your advertising dollars and those things a bit and get, 5-10% here, there, a little less, little more. But that human component inside every business has by far and away the greatest variance. And if you shift that down, a company that should be making money will fail immediately. If you shift it up, a company that shouldn't make money is going to, be a multi-million-dollar company if you have the right people in the right seats. So it really just comes down to that human element. And it took me going through 6 years of a failed business and then a successful business to learn all those lessons and sort of trial and error to come to where I'm at today and understanding people and understanding the business model side.
Well said. I mean, when it comes down to it, keeps coming back to people, keeps coming back to how you're leading them and the types of people that, as they say in Good to Great, get on the bus, but in the right positions on the bus. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's very interesting to hear about the diversity factor and your thought about diversity of worldview versus like demographics and psychographics. It's really fascinating because I think we do take a very interesting dialogue, if that's what we want to call it, in this country about diversity. It's way off base, and that's refreshing to hear. So, as you're building this business, and now you're helping others to other business leaders to level up from management to leadership. You're doing all these things, and you've written a book, right? You've written a book out there. Why don't you talk for just a second about the book?
Yeah. So my book's called The Warrior's Mindset, The 6 Keys to Greatness. And what I started finding as I started working with some even senior executives that were very successful inside these large companies or smaller companies, I started to talk about leadership concepts, not management, but leadership concepts. And a lot of them got uncomfortable. I could tell that they didn't know how to verbalize it or even grasp what I was talking about. Right? No, leadership is about when they show up. It's about KPIs and metrics. I'm like, no, that's management. And what about leadership? And what about developing them as whole people? And what I realized was, these people haven't actually done the self work on their own mindset to be able to get to a proficient level about self-leadership. And if you can't lead yourself, then of course you're going to be uncomfortable. And that's the reason that these companies were and sometimes avoiding or didn't even understand what leadership development was, because they didn't know how to lead themselves. Those conversations with themselves hadn't happened. The mindset work hadn't happened. And so I thought, well, I need to really get this down. Like if this is going to be sort of the limiting variable of implementing these ideas I have about how leadership should be and how fulfillment and profitability go together, it needs to start with the individual. So I know it sounds like a bold claim, but I sat down and said, I'm going to create a universal human framework to solve human discontent. And I wanted to do it agnostic of cultural belief, ideologies, political beliefs, religious beliefs. One thing I found in the military by going and interacting with people in places of the world that couldn't be more different than the average American or myself is we're 99% the same. We're human beings and we want the same things. We act the same. We behave the same. And so I knew there were some universal principles there that I wanted to get to. So I created those, and I'll just go real quick. I'm not going to, because we could do a whole nother hour or, an hour or two on this, but and I believe in the framework, and it's what I teach now. So it's perspective and gratitude, perspective of yourself, perspective of the world, gratitude for life. That's your fuel source. Gratitude is a fuel source that never dies when you do it properly. Internal locus of control is key too. So making sure that you understand that you control your destiny and your decisions. The world doesn't happen to you. And then 3, the North Star theory. So I have a theory about actually a life purpose that creates fulfillment. And it's that every living creature is its most happy, fulfilled, and content when its activities and environment are aligned with its genetic purpose. And I believe that's true across all organic life. And for human beings, we're tribal creatures, we're communal creatures. I'm sure with your studies in family dynamics that one of, if not the only key indicator universally for someone who reports contentment and fulfillment in their life is the quality of their close relationships. And that tells us that we aren't individualistic creatures. If you put people in solitary confinement, that's a form of torture. And why is that, right? Because we're not designed to be that way. We're not designed to live independently like that. So anyway, North Star theory, then it's self-discipline, right? We got to have the right tools to actually execute. Then it's perseverance, because, when you shift from sort of a short-term survivalist mindset to I'm going to impact other people, I'm going to change my world around me, I'm going to maximize my experience of life, you better get hard, you better toughen up, because that's a tough road to go down. And then the 6th one is leadership. So that's the amplification. So the first 5 are really about yourself. But if you really want to maximize your greatness and experience of your life and maximize this impact on the world around you, you can't just be an individual contributor. You have to be able to communicate your vision. You have to be able to get people on board and move the needle, which is exactly what, we try to teach. And you work with your clients on with their companies of how do we do that as leaders to get that group of people. Every major great movement thing that has changed our world, good and bad in our history, good and bad, because leadership's agnostic, has come from leadership, right? It's come from a group, not a single individual.
Yeah, that's so great. I appreciate you cluing us in on what's going on, what's in that. If you're in that book, if you're a leader, you need to check this out for sure. And one of the things we want to talk about is, as you've been now coaching and training other leaders, what's been your biggest struggle of not losing the balance that you hold dear? When it comes to your own health, your own, family life, and everything that is balanced for you. Well, what are some things that maybe you struggle with as a leader to keep that balance?
Man, I learned so many lessons. I'll tell you that I see the same thing, and I'm guilty of it if I'm not careful, with entrepreneurs, and as I do, and I especially see it with veterans that get out of the military. And it's the same thing. It's the same problem, which is, in the military, especially in some of the jobs and roles I played, the answer when things are really hard, when they're at their worst, is keep going, right? The answer is keep marching, right? The sun's going to rise, the mission's going to end. Even if the deployment's 8 months long, you're going to come home, you're going to get 30 days off. Like, you're going to redeploy, the mission's going to end, and you're going to get rest, refit, recover. But when you're out in the real world as an entrepreneur, especially, or a business owner, no one's going to tell you when redeployment is. No one's going to tell you when the mission ends, right? You have to really define those things for yourself. And that was something I struggled with for a long time. I never had, I talk about that failed business. I never had a panic attack, and I was in combat for 22 months. I was deployed for over 30 months, of my life, and never had a panic attack. And I had 2 as an entrepreneur in my first 3 years. I had hives. I had emergency appendectomy. I mean, I pushed myself to that point that was so far, and it was almost like I was like a Lamborghini, right? Like I had been fine-tuned to be this like machine that could just go and go and go, and then turn off all the internal switches mentally that a normal person would be like, I'm hurting, I'm going to stop today. Like, I can't keep my eyes open, I'm going to sleep. No, I just got trained to push past all those things because I was in the system that in some ways was going to look out for me. And then when you're out here on your own, you realize there's no system necessarily, right? You have to create it for yourself. And so it really has been a journey. And I think that balance is, in some ways people have a very narrow definition of it. So the way I look at it is, I'm not someone who wants to have a day or weekly balance that is necessarily the same. Like, I don't want to work 7-8 hours in a job that I kind of like, and then maybe go to happy hours and have free time. Like, that doesn't provide me fulfillment. And as, real high achievers, sometimes you've got to put the pedal to the metal. But what I found the key thing for me is I have to really be in tune with my body and my mind, and pull myself back from my emotional drive, and just know that however hard you go, however, you have to equal it. You have to balance it out with that recovery. So if you have a launch or you've got something going on and you need to crush it for 3 weeks and go hard, that's fine. But you need to take those 5 days off, right? And while you do that, you have to put in, proactive approaches. So, for me, the last year, I'd say in the last 18 months, I've made a greater leap in my own mindset than I have in any other period of my life. And it was because those things came into focus for me. And I started prioritizing things like I started meditating. I started, studying. I started teaching myself that the moment and just being, there's value in just being. There's value in the moment. There's value in just being alive and experiencing life. And sometimes we're so driven that we don't think, well, if this moment doesn't produce an outcome, I wasted it. And you don't want to waste time, but it was really a switch for me to understand that if I do respect life as much as I do, and I have so much gratitude for it, then it's okay to just sort of sit back and bask in that and recover and appreciate, show real gratitude by doing nothing sometimes, but experiencing gratitude and just breathing in air and being glad that I'm in this country and the sun's shining and no one's shooting at me and it's a good day.
There's so much truth to the struggle with being present. And I think a big, characteristic of balance is that idea of being in the moment, right? And just being grateful. That gratitude goes a long way in your growth and development. So I really appreciate that, Sean. Sean, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show and to learn from your successes and failures. And I feel you when you're talking about the business failing and moving forward and some of the anxiety and the things that we struggle with as business owners. It is definitely an up and down, not a perfect, equilibrium. And I think that when I wrote this book, Achieving Balance, that was a big thing I wanted to emphasize is there are 3 main myths. And the first one is you can't do it all at the same time. And there's really no such thing as an equilibrium in balance. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are talking about, balance or work-life integration instead of balance, which I get, it's a different word, but it's moving closer to the idea of what balance isn't. And what balance truly is living your highest priorities, making time for yourself, making time for the family, and being able to grow and scale your business. So I appreciate you sharing with us what you've learned, pitfalls, and the great things that have helped you, and what you're doing to help others is fantastic. If our listeners want to catch up with you, they want to learn more about your leadership and your book, how can they get a copy of your book?
So it's on Amazon. It actually took me a year later, but I finally got the audiobook out in December of last year too, with some bonus content and conversation between chapters. So that's all on Amazon. If you just search, Sean Patton, Warrior's Mindset, it'll come up. To find out, I'm on LinkedIn, all that stuff, all the normal social media things. And my company's website is really kind of the best if you want to place to go to, if you want to hear more about our processes and how we help people. And that's strongerleaders, strongerprofits.com.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for your time and efforts and your leadership. It's very much needed. Guys, gals, if you've enjoyed listening, watching, just being a fly on a wall in this conversation, please like, share, subscribe. Send this to someone who needs to hear about leadership today in this balanced growth that we're trying to accomplish. And again, until next time, remember, live life on purpose.